right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last in-person Tuesday Tans Roundtable. The Tuesday Tans Roundtable, as some of you know, is our flagship discussion series that brings together global topics, issues, and trends. And they're also connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. Today's topic is a conversation network protecting South Florida's endangered lands. And then if you haven't had a chance yet, please, I'm going to ask you to scan the QR code so we can capture your participation in today's session. This is going to help us to continue reporting our attendance as well. Also, for today's engagement, we ask you that you raise your hand. We're going to have microphones around the room so that way we can capture your engagement in the recording as well. Okay. Also for our Global Learning Medallion students, make sure that you do a screenshot of the sign-in sheet as well. If you would like to learn more about the programs that we have here in Global Learning, make sure that you visit us in the lobby. We have the Peace Corps Prep program, also scholarships and fellowships available, and we'll be happy to talk to you. We also have an event today. The Global Learning Student Board will be hosting an event in breast cancer awareness. They're going to be meeting at PC 249, so make sure that you join them as well. It's right after this event. They're going to be meeting from 1 o'clock to 3 p.m., writing letters for ladies that are going through breast cancer at the moment. Also, today's topic, it is connected to a news article. This week alone, we're connecting this article to an article from the National Geographic. So if you would like to access the article for today, is go.fiu.edu/TTR 1028. And this article is this paradise or a parking lot? This Florida ecosystem is a battleground. So make sure that you visit it as well. Okay. Also, the session is connected to SDG number 13, climate action by taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Andrea Mirow. She is the outreach coordinator for the environmental endangered lands at the Fairchild organization. So she coordinates the outreach and education for Fairchild conservation team and is partner Miami-Dade County's environmentally endangered lands program. She's a native from Miami, and Andrea graduated from Ambridge College in 2022 with a major in biology and art history, and she became involved in environmental education in Florida through the Florida Master Naturalist program and has over 6 years of education experience. So let's give Andrea a big round of applause, please.
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Awesome. So, I'm really excited to be here. Before I kind of jump into my presentation, I do want to put a couple things out there. The first is that I am by no means an expert in the conservation network here in South Florida. I have only been kind of in this field for about 2 years, and every day I feel like I learn more and more about what we're doing here, what needs to be done, what are the challenges, what are the solutions. So I don't have all the answers, but I am coming here to talk about my experiences being in the conservation world down here in South Florida, and as someone who generally is very passionate about the natural world, and really as someone who cares deeply about protecting what we have down here in South Florida. So with that, I'll start, and I actually want to kind of pick it up with a little bit of trivia. So we'll have some, I'll be posing some questions for the audience. So if y'all want to raise your hand or just shout it out, this is just going to be super informal and casual. So also, if y'all have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to just blurt it out. So to start, I want to know, does anyone know what this habitat is called? You can just shout it out.
Pine rocklands?
Yeah, exactly, pine rocklands. So this is one of the major habitats down here in South Florida, and this is kind of what I'm talking about when I say endangered lands, right? So the pine rocklands is a very special habitat. It is only found down here in South Florida, a couple islands in the Turks and Caicos, a little bit in Cuba, a little bit in the Florida Keys, and it's home to over 400 plant species, and it houses lots of really neat and special animals and insects and critters and cool things, including the Florida bonneted bat, which is one of our endangered bat species here in South Florida, and the Bartram's scrub hairstreak, another butterfly that is currently imperiled. So a little bit of context when it comes to the pine rocklands. This is what the historic range of the pine rocklands look like in Miami, right? It used to cover a big part of Miami. It's got an elevation gain. It sits on this geological formation called the Miami Rock Ridge, which is made out of limestone. And that little blue dot right there is more or less where we are right now, right? So I want to get a poll from the audience. How much do y'all think is left of our pine rocklands? 30%. All right. Any other ideas? Yeah. 27. All right. Any other ones? Yeah, go for it. 10%. All right. So I see Connie with her hand up. Believe it or not, outside of Everglades National Park, right? So in urban Miami-Dade, we have about 1.2% of our pine rocklands left. That's crazy. That's a very small number. And a lot of this has to do with the development and the history of Miami. The pine rocklands are found on, as I was saying, the highest elevation ground in Miami. And so when folks started first settling down here and really developing the area, that was the first place where they started to develop. And a big industry down here in South Florida was logging, right? And pine rocklands, the predominant and really the only tree that should be in pine rocklands is the South Florida slash pine, right? So those trees provided a lot of lumber, and therefore were kind of the first ones to go. So we have very little, very few remaining pockets of pine rocklands, and one of the things that we try to do in the conservation world is prioritize the habitats that are most at risk, this being one of them. So a couple of other habitats that we're also unfortunately struggling to protect down here in South Florida are these. Does anyone want to blurt out kind of what some of these habitats are? Any ideas? Yeah. Yeah, so mangroves up on the top right, I guess. What else? Sawgrass prairies, yep, down below. What else? Yep, the wetlands are down there on that bottom right. What else? These two are a little tricky. This is showing a big hole that's found in these upland areas. They sometimes fill with water. It's called a solution hole. Any ideas? Okay, so this is a really neat habitat. It's called a tropical hardwood hammock. And it's usually a forested upland habitat, and it's got a lot of moisture, a lot of humidity, and it's really a place where you can find a lot of really cool orchids, bromeliads, fern species, super neat things. And then above that, this one's a little tricky. This one is a picture actually I took from Crandon Park and Preserve, from the Bear Cut Preserve at Crandon Park. And it is a picture of coastal strand, dune habitats. Those are, some of those habitats that we have kind of along our beaches. So we have so many of these different habitats, and they're very different, and they're very unique. And because of that, we are sitting in an area called a biodiversity hotspot. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have really active environmental protection happening here in South Florida. So our region is in one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots. It sits in this area called the North American Coastal Plain. But in addition to that, you can see it's really close close to that other biodiversity hotspot of the Caribbean, right? So because of that, we get these really interesting native species that are found in their southern range of the North American coastal plain and in the northern range of the Caribbean kind of hotspots. So just in Miami-Dade County, these are some of the things that we have. These are rare plants, rare animal species, and as you can see, we've got endangered plant species, we've got threatened plant species, we've got lots of different endangered animal species and beetles and butterflies and things like that. And this is only in Miami-Dade County. That's a lot, right? 60 endemic plant taxa only in this county. That's pretty incredible. In addition to that, we stand out from the rest of the U.S., or rather I might say the continental U.S. So these are some maps and visuals coming from the Biota of North America program, and they just kind of give you a visual of how special South Florida is when it comes to plant diversity, in plant biodiversity in particular, right? And some of these maps are showing somewhat different things. Some are showing species density, some are just showing number of native, taxa of plants. But it'll give you a little bit of an idea. So this is talking about native trees, right? We are number one. Miami-Dade County is number one. We've got 154, right? Compared to other areas of Florida, you'll see that the numbers are just a little bit less, but still, 154, pretty cool. Then when it comes to vascular plants, so these are things that essentially things that aren't like mosses and liverworts and stuff like that. So flowering plants and trees, stuff like that. We are also number one. We've got 303. So we've got vascular plants. We're number one in that as well. Then when we look at native fern diversity, right? So these are kind of our funky fern friends. We are also number one in fern species, 60 just in Miami-Dade County. And a lot of those are found in those solution holes that I was talking about before in hardwood hammocks. What about epiphytes? So epiphytes are plants that grow on other plants. Orchids, bromeliads, some ferns also are epiphytes. We're also number one. You're starting to see a trend here, right? We have, over 60 in Miami-Dade County. The problem is that we have a lot of this incredible plant biodiversity, and when I talk about biodiversity, I talk about native biodiversity, so plants and animals that are from Florida, have adapted in Florida, were here long before humans were here. But we also struggle with exotic plants. So these are plants that have been brought in from around the world. And some of these are exotic and don't really pose a threat, but some of these can grow really fast and can actually take over some of our natural habitats. And that's what we call invasive plants or invasive species, right? And so Miami-Dade County, we're number 6 across all of the US for the number of exotic plant species that we have here. That's really a lot. 523, that's a ton of non-native plants that we have here in Miami. If you look at other areas of Florida, up in the Panhandle, you'll see like 85, 55, 48, 37. That's way more manageable. 523 is a lot of non-native plants. So what we're seeing, and this isn't really, I'm not saying that there's causation here, but there's definitely a correlation between all of these exotic plants and a decline in our native plant species. So already, unfortunately, we have seen that we have plant species, at least one that's gone extinct from Miami-Dade County. We have a couple that are extirpated, meaning that 40 years ago they were found here, and it's been 40 years since we haven't seen them. Historical species too, those are kind of the in-between, right? And then lots of plant species that are threatened or endangered and that really need advocates, right? So unfortunately, it's not just plants that are in decline. Who's got any other ideas about what else might be in decline? Yeah. Okay, what sorts of animals though? Okay. Right, so we've got mammal species in decline. There are some species in particular that we call indicator species, and usually these are the ones that when there are some serious problems going on in the environment, they're the first ones that their numbers start to plummet, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So we've seen a decline in butterflies, in moths. The highest areas of butterfly decline have been in this kind of vertical swath of the country and in South Florida. We've seen over the past 20 years, a 22% reduction of the abundance of a lot of these moths and caterpillars and butterflies. We have birds. We actually have birds that have gone extinct here as well, unfortunately, right? Like the Carolina parakeet. And we've got birds that used to be down here in South Florida, like the scrub jay and the red-cockaded woodpecker, that are no longer found up here. You got to travel up north to find them. And then on top of that, we've got lots of birds that are really rare, that used to be really common and are no longer as common. And like you mentioned, mammals, right? Lots of mammals that we're struggling to find here. We used to have black bears that were really abundant, and they would help us, they would help manage kind of the pine rocklands, if that makes sense. They were a very important animal in the pine rockland ecosystem. We don't have that anymore, and our pine rocklands are really struggling because of it. Same thing, Florida panther, our bats, right? Skunks, all sorts of stuff. So you could probably say, like, okay, Andrea, yeah, so what? There are a couple birds and a couple butterflies and some plants, like, who cares, right? You know, it's just a couple things here and there. It's not like we see them all the time, like we're going to miss them that much, right? Well, I beg to differ. Not only do these habitats provide homes for a lot of these animals and plants, but they also give us a lot of really important benefits. So this is something that we call ecosystem services, kind of thinking about what habitats provide back to us. So what are some things that y'all think maybe these habitats give us? Clean water. I love it. What else? Oxygen, right? Yep.
They protect us from, for example, the mangroves. They protect us from hurricanes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've touched on a lot of those things, right? For one, in Miami, walking down a street like Old Cutler, for example, with all of these trees versus walking down the sidewalk on US 1 on a hot day, you can really feel the difference in temperature, right? And imagine if we planted way more trees around our city, that would help with this urban heat island that we have because we've got so much built up material that absorbs so much of heat from the sun, right? Yeah. Yes.
What kind of trees do need special attention to planting? Because when we say plant more trees, we don't consider the diversity of trees.
That's a great point. I think that, unfortunately, we have tended to plant the same 3 or 4 trees that everybody kind of likes and enjoys and thinks are pretty, even if some of those are not native trees. And there's actually an immense diversity of native trees that could be really well suited to serving as our street trees and providing canopy. But in addition to planting trees, I also mean protecting the forests that we have within our city that already have tons of trees, right? Like our pine rockland preserves, like our hardwood hammocks. If you are in a neighborhood that has one of those urban preserves in them, you're going to feel a difference in the temperature just because you have, there we go, just because you have this preserve right next to you, right? But that's a great point. You mentioned mangroves and hurricanes and flooding. That's a great ecosystem service we get. And someone else mentioned, you know, it cleans it cleans the water, it cleans the air. When we have water that's collecting in these wetlands, if you don't have a wetland, then the water is just going to filter down into the aquifer, and anything that the water's picked up along the way is going to, you know, eventually kind of seep into our aquifer too. If we've got plants, those plants are really good at sucking up all the nutrients, all the things that we don't want to be drinking in our water, right? So why are we at this place right now where we've unfortunately lost so much of our native habitats and are struggling to kind of protect them? What do we think?
Climate change?
Climate change is a great point. Absolutely. I'll talk about that. Was there something else? Say that again?
Republican policies generally don't put in as much emphasis on the natural environment as with more liberal-minded.
So there's certainly a role that government plays in how we work on environmental protection, and I will talk about that. Yeah.
Urban development.
Urban development, absolutely. Yeah, so habitat loss, right? We've got this massive city that is growing and growing and growing, and it seems like it's not stopping anytime soon. We have an urban, development boundary that seems like it's just there kind of for fun. So habitat loss is one. Mm. That's a great point. Yeah.
Are we building
So
things that aren't as close in proximity to walking distance compared to driving distance?
absolutely. And actually, that's something that I'll kind of touch on in a little bit. In addition to those things, we also have invasive species, right? We were seeing that we have lots of invasive species and exotic species down here in South Florida. And these are posing major threats, right? Unfortunately, as much as we love birds, birds are a major predator for, cats are a major predator for our bird populations. There we go. We've also got our pythons. We've got a lot of invasive plants. These are taking over our areas and making it really hard to protect them. Someone here mentioned climate change, right? These models, which can be very daunting and scary, present a future that is really unpleasant. A lot of the stuff that is shown underwater as early as 2060 in this visual is areas that have plants that are not adapted to growing in water, right? And in addition to that, I think that we could all say that we have driven around areas of Miami where we see a lot of just pavements and some, concrete and lawns and stuff like that. And these sorts of sites and these sorts of, this isn't really an environment. This isn't really giving us anything. It's not providing food. It's not providing habitat. It's not helping with heat. It's actually kind of causing a net negative thing because the concrete absorbs all this heat, and so it makes things hotter. The grass requires a ton of watering and fertilizer. So there are ways that we can incorporate vegetation, incorporate plants into our homes that are really good for us and good for the environment. And unfortunately, some of these plants that we tend to see a lot, right, Calusia and all of those things, from an environmental point, you might as well just have plastic plants because these aren't doing anything. So I think I've established by now that there's certainly a need for conservation here in South Florida. Are there any questions so far? Yeah.
Sorry, what are some examples of better looking front yards, would you say?
That's a great point. I'm going to get to that, I promise. Yeah. Did you have a question as well? Yeah.
Wildlife that Muscovy ducks are, because I've seen a lot of Muscovy ducks all the time.
That's an interesting point. I'm actually not 100% sure, but I think that no matter what, a non-native species is going to play some role in the environment because it kind of disturbs the balance of how things were. But that's a great point. Maybe that is something I will search up afterwards and see if I can give you a better answer. Yeah, go for it.
We mentioned earlier government involvement. There's an initiative in either Singapore or Indonesia where they're trying to incorporate more. They're trying to essentially do eco-architecture,
Yeah,
incorporating plant life and greenery into
absolutely.
their buildings. Do you think that's possible to transfer over here? And if so, how can we push for that?
How do we do that? Yeah, that's a great question. So, yes, I do think it's possible. Because if you look at pictures of Singapore from 20 or 25 years ago, it was a city that looked a lot like Miami, right? So if they've been able to have this move towards green architecture, towards sustainability, why can't we, right? I think that there is something about the government that inherently has a role in that, and I am going to talk a little bit about how we've got these different spheres that are required to have an environmental success like that, and I think it requires a bit more collaboration and kind of compromise here than maybe it has in Singapore. Yeah.
For a while, and there are issues with that, with free speech and everything else, but they are really good at investing in public projects and also public investment in people basically creating the own architecture, like landscape architecture, who are native in that space. So they can actually be kind of bullish about, hey, if you're doing something, your resources are going to be from Singapore, and so it's interesting there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, so Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden, where I work, has an initiative called My City, My Garden, and we're really pushing for that sort of reimagining of Miami as a place that has urban green space and that is a habitable place to live and is pleasant to be in. And the director of the garden, Dr. Carl Lewis, has a lot of really neat presentations and ideas and things in works to kind of move that forward. I don't want to steal his thunder, and I don't know as much about it as he can. So, but if you're interested, definitely we can connect. Yeah, for sure. So, as I was saying, we have this need for conservation here in South Florida. We've made that clear. And the way that that happens, I would argue, is by kind of collaborating across these three spheres. So we've got the public, right? People like you, people like, I don't know, our parents, our families, our friends, just everybody really. Then we've got the government, right? And then we also have NGOs or like nonprofit organizations that do work in the environmental realm. And when we have collaboration across these threse spheres, that's when we see that we can get really impactful environmental work done. So, to kind of give you all a little idea of what these three spheres look like here in South Florida, this is just a snapshot. So this is not an extensive, thing of every single NGO we have down here doing this stuff, but this is just a little tiny one. So in terms of our government agencies, we have, on the federal side, obviously the Department of the Interior, in which the National Park Service, sits. We have 2 national parks here in South Florida. Then on the state level, we've got the South Florida Water Management District and Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. And then at a municipal level, at a local level, just looking at Miami-Dade County, we have Miami-Dade Parks, and we have the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. So this is just gives you an idea of kind of the complexity, because we have all of these different layers that all sometimes need to work hand in hand. And then in terms of the nonprofit side, Fairchild and the Institute for Regional Conservation, these nonprofits do a lot of kind of boots on the ground work. They're out there in our preserves, doing the rare plant monitoring, cutting down the invasive species, doing the floristic inventories, all of that sort of stuff. And then we have the groups that are doing a bit more of the legal work, like the Center for Biological Diversity. They've filed lots and lots of suits and things to really protect the environment that we have down here as legal advocates. And groups like the Tropical Audubon Society, which do a lot of outreach, a lot of education, a lot of advocacy work. So, yes. Yeah.
Not necessarily think of there is FIU, the institution, but there is the FIU, everyone sitting here in the room. And so a lot of these decisions about how we're going to use land and things like that, this happens at commission meetings, and commission meetings are open to the public. And while there's all these experts that are expected to be there, you guys are not necessarily expected, but you guys are making the change.
Absolutely.
So it's when students and voters find the time to show up that we win tree ordinance and things that they paint a picture that this is going to be good for us. A lot of times the language is written to fool us. So please show up to those city commission meetings and vote.
Yes. I've got a whole thing about that, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we have a lot more power than we think we do, and then we're kind of led on to believe that we do. And yeah, I think in the past, I'll talk a little bit about this, but in the past year, I've really kind of turned my shift a bit more towards local politics, because that's a space where I feel I can really make the most impact for my community, for my neighborhood, for the trees that I walk by every day when I go on my walk outside, So there are lots of challenges to having these different spheres work together. what do y'all think are some of them? Like, what are some things that are kind of inhibiting really nice collaboration? Yeah.
Just the lack of education. People don't know that there's resources out there that can help with a project they might have.
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of times we have both a public and oftentimes folks in government who are very misinformed and don't know a lot about, the importance of these habitats, the importance of the environment. We also have, I'd say, a public generally that is, we are hooked to our phones. We are getting blasted with information 24/7, and it is so exhausting to see all of this crazy stuff on our phones, in other people's lives, in our lives, in the world, etc. And then also go to a county commission meeting. You're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. What do you mean I have to go sit in line, or whatever it is. Like, we are being bombarded with information where it almost can paralyze us. And I say that from a personal experience, So that's one of them for sure. Government, like I said, or like you said, there's misinformation oftentimes. And things can get very political when they don't need to be political, because across the aisle, there are folks who care about the environment and want to protect it. And in terms of nonprofits and NGOs, there's a really serious issue with funding, with finding the resources to have NGOs and nonprofits that can sustain themselves. And also, the last thing that I'll mention, which is kind of surprising and I hadn't thought about before I was in this role, is land ownership. So when we're talking about endangered lands or natural resources, that land is owned by someone. Whether it's owned by the National Park Service, or it's owned by Florida Department of Transportation, or it's owned by the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program, or it's owned by one of your uncles, that person or that organization determines how to use that land. Whether they want to remove all of the plants that are on there and lay cement down, whether they want to have folks from Fairchild come in and survey the area and look at the different plants that are there, whether they want to just let invasive plants grow on it the entire, year round. So owning land, the best way to manage environmental land, unfortunately, is owning it, because then you get the say, right? So what I want to talk about now is kind of share some of my experiences on how these different spheres have interacted with each other and how they've worked to bring some environmental successes. So the first one is talking about how the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program, which is part of Miami-Dade County Department of Environmental Resource Management, how EEL, the EEL program, has interacted with Fairchild and with Fairchild's conservation team in particular. So a little background about the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. This was a program that was established in the 1990s. Residents of Miami-Dade County were starting to notice that there were these really mass developments coming through the county, and they were worried about losing all of these natural areas. And they said, we need to set aside some money to buy these lands, protect them, manage them, and make sure that they'll be there for my kids, my grandkids, my great-great-grandkids, etc. So that was the creation of the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. Currently, it owns or it manages 29,000 acres of land down here in South Florida. That's a lot of land. You'll see in this, this visual right here, everything that's green is essentially managed by the EEL program. So we've got a lot of wetlands down in the south. We've got patches of mangroves, patches of coastal strand and dunes, and we also, kind of a little bit further west, we see these little scatters of little green dots. A lot of those are pine rocklands and hammocks that we've protected. So that's really exciting. And some of these are close to the public because they're very sensitive. Some of them are, actually a lot of them, are open to the public. So if you actually scan the QR code, that'll take you to the EEL program's story map. I also have other stuff here about EEL, so don't feel super rushed to do that right now if you don't want to. But these are open and accessible to the public. You can go, you can enjoy the pine rocklands, you can bird, you can just hang out, you can come to our volunteer events and help us restore some of these habitats. So yeah, the EEL program does really fantastic things, and I would say if you want to get involved in local advocacy, they are a group that really could use advocates, and they do a lot of really neat stuff. So on the other side, Fairchild's conservation team is, the whole purpose of the conservation team is to essentially reduce the extinction risk of plants from South Florida and the Caribbean. So we do this in a couple of different ways, but we partner really closely with the EEL program. And this is one of those partnerships that I'm highlighting because it works incredibly well. So these are just some of the things that we do together. The conservation team will come up and work with the EEL program to develop management plans, so to help preserve managers figure out what needs to be done on these sites. You know, do we need to get a fire down in the pine rockland? Do we need to remove these invasive trees? Do we need to remove these native plants that are just not where they're supposed to be? Do we need to, all sorts of different things. We help with restoration projects. So this one up there on the top right is a restoration project that we're doing together at 80 Barnes Park and Preserve. If y'all want to come out, tomorrow actually in the morning, we go from 9 to 11, we weed, we plant, it's very fun, very wholesome. But we've been doing this work now for about 1.5 years, and it's been amazing. The site that we're working on has really transformed, and it's really beautiful to see. We do long-term habitat monitoring. So this is in an area around the Deering Estate where we go, and every year we'll go to these plots, we'll survey it, we'll see what's there, what isn't. We'll take measurements of trees and growth, all of these different things. And that gives us an idea of how these sites are changing over the years. This is something that we've got going on now for, I want to say maybe 20 years, maybe longer. This is my boss, Jen. She's awesome. This is her staring into a really big solution hole in a hardwood hammock, looking for one of the endangered ferns that we've got down here in Florida, the Florida bristle fern, right? So she goes to these sites, she looks to see how they're doing, she says they need more water, we need this, we need that, we need to outplant them, we need to take some seeds, some spores, we need to, she does all of that stuff, and it's super cool, and we do that not only for the rare ferns that we have, but for a lot of the rare species that we have down here. And then in addition to that, this is me with Tiffany, a preserve manager from EEL. I really help them with their volunteer projects, with getting folks connected, with getting them out to our EEL preserves, with getting them engaged in what they're doing. And I'd say the really wonderful collaboration that we have is possible because we have open and good faith communication, and also because we have very similar goals. And our goals are to protect South Florida's nature, protect the plants, protect the animals, protect the habitats, protect, right? When people and when organizations and agencies and the public have somewhat different purposes, that's when stuff can get a lot harder, right? Because then you're kind of moving together, but you're kind of moving in opposite directions. So the next thing I want to talk about is how nonprofits can interact with the public. So this is an example. This is a program that we run through the Fairchild Conservation Team. It's called the Native Plant Network. I've got brochures for anyone who's interested after. And this is a super neat program where we essentially give free native plants to folks in Miami-Dade who want them, and with the intention of them planting them and then starting native gardens. They can be at home, they can be at schools, they can be in businesses. We work often with municipal governments, so towns and stuff like that. And the idea is really to expand native plants in Miami-Dade. We also do field trips, we ask them for seeds, stuff like that. So if y'all remember this was our old historic range of the Pine Rocklands. This is what we've got left. And this is what we've got left with our native plant network yards, right, or gardens. And what we've seen is that wildlife and wildlife is coming back. So these are just some pictures of things that our Native Plant Network members. I'm not sure actually where this is, but it's a fox. We've got an egret right over there. We've got all sorts of different butterflies, moths, caterpillars, birds. They're all using these native plants and these native gardens because if you think about it, they adapted in South Florida to rely on these plants, right? Not like Calusia or some of the weird palms that we have or whatever. They adapted to the things that were here. And I believe the young lady who asked this question is no longer here, but maybe she'll see it on the recording. But this is an example of a native yard. Oftentimes we think of native yards and we're like, oh, they're so weedy, they're like scrawny looking, but it really is possible to have beautiful native yards that we want to spend time in, that we want to be in, that provide something to us and to the environment. And in addition to that, our Native Plant Network members, those who want to, can give us seeds back, which we then seed bank. And we've got over 3 million seeds, I want to say, maybe more, of native Florida plants that we are safe, that we're collecting, that we have stored, and that we're studying too to learn, okay, when we plant these, how many germinate and what do they need to germinate and how do you grow them after you germinate them and all sorts of other stuff. So if you're interested in that, come see me after. I've got brochures. And then the last kind of realm of spheres, getting close to the end, so bear with me, is this interaction between the government and the public, right? So I feel like these are the ones that we see and have heard of pretty often, which is how we interact with usually our federal government or state government and stuff like that, right? Like vote and sign petitions. And this is, for me, like who I would call, for example, based on where I live in Miami, who I would call if I wanted to chat with my representative. And while that's all very important, over the past year, I've started to focus a little bit more on local politics and local government. And so same thing with voting, right? There's actually a City of Miami race happening November 4th. So if you're in the City of Miami and you feel interested, feel free. But that's one thing. There are programs that can teach you how to be an advocate for the environment down here. Tropical Audubon Society has an ambassador program. Well, they'll tell you and teach you how to go and give public comment, how to sign up for things, how to start these campaigns, why we should do it, etc. So there are resources out there. There are resources out there if you want to get more involved. And then the last thing is I actually attended 2 commission meetings. So one was the county commission, one was a town, Palmetto Bay town, village of Palmetto Bay meeting, and I gave a public comment. One was a 1-minute little talk, and the other was, I think, also 1 minute, now that I think about it. And I went to both of these not on behalf of Fairchild, on my own free time, as a private citizen, but as someone who really cares about this stuff and wanted to make my voice heard. And while neither of the meetings came out the way that I wanted them to, I still felt very proud of myself. I slept really well that night, and I was very proud that I showed up when it mattered, And some of these things, like Connie was saying, is like about the tree ordinance or about land acquisition or about giving money to EEL, right? About the budget. That's super important stuff. Yeah, go for it.
If I may, I know you said you didn't get the outcome you were hoping for, but if enough of us show up,
yeah,
change is possible.
Yeah.
In numbers, it is possible.
Yeah.
So.
And they make, unfortunately, I would say the process is built so that it really deters people from coming. I had to wait 5 hours to speak at that county commission meeting. But like you said, if enough people show up, it really makes a difference. They make those decisions there in the moment based on how many people are wearing green shirts and how many are wearing pink ones and how many are wearing whatever.
I remember I was trying to move around work for the Pine Rocklands Commission meeting, and I was so funny. I was like really kind of split that day because I was glued to this thing online. But they actually told me, "Oh no, it's closed to public comment." However, people who knew that that was not the case had a lot of people show up. And guess what? You were saying when there's enough people who are actually staying, there was a huge shift, right?
Yeah.
Because that was in limbo. I was very worried about that with the Zoo Miami decision to whether or not to sell that land and develop it, well, allow the development for the water park, right? And guess what? Huge victory there,
Yeah.
right? All of
It
those
has
spaces.
only been like paused, so
Yeah.
everyone that cared, be on the lookout. Yeah.
Within the city halls, have you encountered any sort of opposition to your work?
No, I have not. I have found that it is a very collaborative and like supportive environment. And in fact, I'm so glad you asked that question because when I was at the county commission meeting, I ran into folks from a nonprofit that we work with pretty often, Miami Waterkeeper. Started talking to the whole Miami Waterkeeper, crew. We had a great conversation. Like it felt like a very welcoming space where the folks who really care and not that people who don't go to this don't care, because that's, it's a privilege to be able to go to these sorts of things. But there's a really great sense of community in these sorts of things where people are standing up and speaking for what they believe in. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm so close, is we have volunteer work days with the EEL program. They're very fun, they're educational, and these aren't the only opportunities out there. If you just want to spend more time in nature, there's so many options. You just have to look for them, and that's the hard part. The Tropical Audubon has field trips. I'm sure there are groups here at FIU that are doing things. Like there are WhatsApp groups that are like for swamp friends, and like there are lots of ways to get involved. It just takes that extra little oomph, And before I end, I just want to say that it's really possible to achieve environmental wins here in South Florida. And although sometimes it can feel very daunting and very depressing, it is possible. And it's really important to stay connected to the reason why we're doing these things and why we're advocating and why we're showing up and why we're out there like getting all bitten up by mosquitoes. And to do that, personally what I do is I go outside. I look at all of these amazing things that are growing, all of these amazing things that are living in this neighborhood right next to me, I look at the trees, the snails, the plants, the eggs, all sorts of things. It makes me feel better. So if y'all are ever feeling really down about it, and even if you're not feeling down about it, go outside, go to the FIU Nature Preserve, go outside, take a walk with a friend, do whatever you need to do, go to an eel preserve, but just go outside. So yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that the calendar that you posted, it's on the newsletter that the learning sends every week. So if you guys are interested in those kind of opportunities, you can find the calendar over there. And as
We'll have
she
some
was saying-
printed.
Okay,
If anyone
so
wants
that
a
same calendar,
hard
you're gonna
copy.
see it every Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. It's gonna be there. So if you're interested, just be on the lookout for that.
Thank you. So happy. Go for it.
Question. First of all, thank you for this. This was absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
As someone that does not have a yard, right? And I'm sure that's lots of us, whether that's internal, like inside plans for your dorm, or I could put something out on my balcony. I'm gonna preemptively answer my own question and say yes, just for the sake of awareness, right? So that people know that it's native plants. But beyond that, is there also a benefit to having like potted plants that are native out in the yard and in our houses and
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. So in our houses, it's a little challenging because these native plants are really adapted to, growing in like hot, humid Florida. So with our AC down to like 75 or whatever it is, they're going to struggle inside. There are still some natives that will do okay inside. But balcony plants, patio plants, potted 100%. Because, for example, I just moved and now I have a yard, but before I didn't. And I had these potted goldenrod plants, and they have now flowered, and they've got these gorgeous yellow flowers on them, and they've already attracted little bees, and I've seen little caterpillars and stuff growing, like hanging out around them. So even in a pot, you know, they're still able to provide services to the environment. The only thing is that they do need more kind of management from us. They just need to be watered way more. So, but yes, if you have balconies, if you've got patios, potted natives are just as good, if not better.
And I wanted to do a quick little plug because I have entirely too much fun doing this when I go outside just to explore. I know nothing of plants or animals or birds, and I think they're fascinating, but I know nothing. I found this app called iNaturalist that you take a picture of something, and then it's like a social media for science people, and they will tell you what it is. And sometimes it'll even like start whole arguments like, no, it is not actually this thing. And you watch them that know a ton more than you do come to the conclusion of what it is, and what it serves as is kind of another form of citizen science because
100%.
you are helping document the things that are in your area.
We use iNaturalist
so much fun.
so often in our work. We will go and be like, oh, we're looking for this butterfly. Like, where, you know, when was the last sighting? And we will literally pull up iNaturalist and search up the butterfly and find it, like in West Kendall or, you know, wherever it is. And it's like, that's amazing, you know? But absolutely, it's community. Another good app is the Merlin birding app because you get to, if you're hearing birds, you can take a recording and then it'll tell you what birds it is. It's really cool. So, yeah. Google Lens will work too? Awesome. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I think it seems like that's maybe it. I want to say I've got Native Plant Network brochures. If folks are interested, definitely come see me for these. I've got EO calendars as well. If you want to, we love to partner with, not only with individuals, but also with groups. If you like have a church group, or if you have a job and you want to do something with your coworkers, or if there are teachers here, professors here that want to do a little field trip with their class, or whatever it may be, come talk to me because that's one of the best ways that we get folks to our work days. And then if anyone has any questions, I have my card. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to keep chatting about this stuff. I could chat about it all day.
Yeah, Connie.
And so my name's Connie Caldwell. I'm with the Office of Sustainability. This is Desiree Fernandez. So we are both sustainability managers for the university, and while Desiree is like searching up grants and helping us apply for things, funding for like tree plantings, things like that, a lot of times I'm out in the field. And what I mean by that is FIU has a nature preserve. Our nature preserve has a tropical hardwood hammock, it has a freshwater wetland, and it also has the globally imperiled ecosystem of pine rockland. If anyone is interested, it is a self-serve environment. You are welcome to it. But if you'd like a tour, I'm happy to provide that. If you do go to the center of the nature preserve, there is a pine rockland. What we do ask is that you just stay on the path. It is a loop because there are some very special plants that are inside the loop that are getting trampled, and it's no fault of yours. You're being curious and exploring, and we encourage that. But at this time, we have some very sensitive plants being restored.
Well, let's give them all a round of applause, please. Once again, thank you so much, Andrea, for the wonderful work you do, for everything that you shared with us today. I think we're all leaving today with a lot of knowledge and also ways how we as citizens can also contribute. So we appreciate it, and it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much.
All right. And just as a last reminder, our TTR sessions, they're going to continue next week, but this time around it's going to be online. We're transitioning to online just to open the room for other students that are fully online as well. We have a session on first generation global determined rewriting, the grad school narrative. led by a professor at the School of International and Public Affairs. So we look forward to having you again next week. If you didn't get a chance to sign in when you came in, please do so before you leave. This is very important for our attendance as well. It was a pleasure having you all, and feel free to connect with Andrea and also Connie and Desiree from the Office of Sustainability. We do have also, all of us are going to be in the lobby in case you have any questions for global learning as well. Thank you for coming.